Is anybody here willing to admit that they're fans of reality shows? Now, the religious people here right now are a little bit nervous. Even if they do, they wouldn't let you know. These other people, straight away, you've got your favorite show in mind, which is chaos all across the room. There's been, quite a few dodgy ones, shall we say, that probably we shouldn't give too much credence to from the pulpit of the church, but we could have some fun with that, but I'll avoid that. There are some very safe ones, Idol, Voice. My wife loves MasterChef, especially the Australian version of that. But there's just been a recent poll done, and out of the reality shows, in third place was Big Brother. In second place was The Amazing Race. And the most successful reality show over 20 plus years is actually Survivor. So what do you reckon to that? Not a lot of agreement with that, that's fine. One of the ones that I do actually enjoy because there is a little bit of purpose to it. Has anybody ever seen Undercover Boss? Very good. Where some kind of high-ranking CEO or owner of a major company goes undercover. They are in disguise for between 1 and 2 weeks, depending on which country is recording the series where they are. And they come in disguised as an entry-level employee. And so a whole story is made up about who this person is. And of course, they're working on the factory floor of the very factories that they own or run. They are in the offices. They are in the corridor. They are drinking coffee and having lunch with people in their organization who are far removed from the CEO, who never has the opportunity of seeing that level of staffing. But the whole program is about that and only works because the identity of the boss is hidden. And so he hears the things around the coffee machine and around the lunch table, as well as seeing the reports of the performance of his staff. Of course, at the end of each program, then he calls people that he has worked with, now without the disguise, now calling them into the CEO's office, and they think, oh my goodness. You can imagine the first 10 seconds, they're scared to death trying to remember everything that they have just done and said for the previous 2 weeks. Some are rewarded, some are given promotion, some are given financial reward. Others, this is a very HR way of doing things, are given retraining. Frightfully HR. Better working conditions, more tools for the job. And others might actually find themselves in the dole queue by the end of the week. Let me also talk to you by way of introduction about the word metaphor. A metaphor is a figure of speech that uses one thing to mean another and makes a comparison between the two. The key thing is it is using words or language about one thing describing another. So Jesus was described as the door, but he wasn't made of wood. He was described as the bread of life, but you can't eat him. He's described as the light of the world, but it doesn't mean he glows in the dark. And he's called the Lamb of God, not because he in any way is like the animal of the lamb, but because the characteristics of the lamb, the sacrificial lamb, were ascribed to him. And for a few minutes today, I want to talk to you, and I'll title these few thoughts, Jesus in Disguise. Jesus in Disguise. I've been reading again the Gospels. If you look in Matthew 25, you get to a point, an important point in Matthew's Gospel, writing for his Jewish audience, and he's talking about eternity now in this chapter. He's talking about when life is done and what God has looked at and seen in the actions and behaviors of his people. Just like the CEO who was actually seen from close. Don't forget, God has eyes and visibility on everything, not only that we say and do, but even what we think, because he's God. But to many of society, and maybe even to too many Christians, he's kind of still that CEO who's in disguise, and we don't see him. We're not aware of him. We're not thinking about him. And even if it's just for a few minutes this morning, can I just open up the possibilities to you of having an encounter and a relationship, an ongoing one, with one who is not a distant CEO, but he's a God who loves you. But also, let me show you what is important to him, so that when you and I stand before, and we all will one day, when we stand before Almighty God, we won't stand embarrassed. We won't stand with regrets. We won't be thinking back in those first 10 seconds of what on earth did I just do with my life? Do I want to join Hillsong Guest Wi-Fi? Join. Thank you. Matthew 25, let me read a few verses to you. For I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you invited me into your home. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you cared for me. I was in prison and you visited me. Then these righteous ones will reply, well, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink, or a stranger and show you hospitality, or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will say, and this is the illustration of the way God looks at how we're to do life, and the king will say, I tell you the truth, when you did it for one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. Then the king will turn to those on the left and say, away with you, you cursed ones, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his demons. For I was hungry and you didn't feed me. I was thirsty and you didn't give me a drink. I was a stranger and you didn't invite me. This is why you've got to join Wi-Fi. Wherever we're up to, verse 44, then they will reply, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, in prison, and not help you? And he will answer, I tell you the truth. When you refused to help the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were refusing to help me. And they will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous will go into eternal life. So Jesus is saying, I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty, I was the stranger, I was naked, I was sick, and you and I know retrospectively that Jesus was never sick, but it's a metaphor. I was the stranger, I was the prisoner. He was Jesus in disguise. He expects us to see the opportunity of doing the right thing, not just for ourselves, but for others. And in doing so, we are doing it to him and we are doing it for him. So how are we doing with living life this way? This isn't a message about giving money to people begging on the street side, although it can be a noble thing at the right time. This isn't a message about visiting the local in prison, let's all go this week, although it is an incredible ministry which we're involved with. This isn't a message only on caring for the sick, which is an incredibly vital and important part of pastoral care apart from everything else. All of those things are legitimate at the right time, and these are verses that are usually used to enable a church to be inspired and motivated to do those things. But I want us to consider God's perspective on what we've just written, what we've just read. I want you to look at this just for a few minutes and see at least 3 big life examples right here that should enable you and I to live the sort of lives when the disguise is taken away, when we stand in front of a God who we have been journeying with variable rates of success and relationship, when we stand there, that we will have done and lived in the right way. Here's the first thing to bring to you today. I think we need to see Jesus in our day-to-day. That is what he was celebrating right there. Seeing Jesus in our day-to-day, seeing opportunity in our day-to-day. The people Jesus was addressing in Matthew 25 couldn't see him, couldn't see what he wanted, couldn't see through the fog of what is the way to do life. His point was, I was hungry and you didn't feed me. I was in disguise. I was there. The opportunity was there. I put people before you. I wanted my church to be the answer to people's needs. I positioned them, placed them there, and you didn't see it. Society does its utmost to eradicate all mention of Jesus. They don't want us not only to see Jesus, but even to mention his name. They try to put him away in the societies of the 21st centuries. It's more comfortable for society not to mention Jesus because he could be a challenge. Always has been, certainly is, and forever will be. They don't want recognition to be given to Jesus. They want to ban his name from being used in government and educational circles because it's more comfortable to do so. Romans 12 says, but here's what I want you to do. God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life. Your sleeping, eating, going to work and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. You see, God is saying, I'm here, people. I'm here. I'm available. I'm right where you are. I see everything you see. I know everything you're trying to know. I have the wisdom that you're seeking for. I'm right here in life 24/7. But please look for me. Please seek me out. Please open your spiritual eyes and please consider me every single day of your life. I don't know about you, but when I became a Christian, suddenly I noticed a blue sky. Never noticed a blue sky before because I'm from Manchester. You don't do blue skies in Manchester. But on the rare occasion that either there was a blue sky in Manchester or I was out of Manchester, suddenly the sky, the blue sky, caused me to think about where all things beautiful came from. I started to recognize God in kind acts from people. I started to recognize God in creation. I started to recognize things that are valuable and beautiful that I'd never bothered to see before. Isn't it amazing when you take your grandchildren out or your children when they're little and you're walking up here as the adult and they're walking down there and you're walking the same pavement as they are, but they see differently than you and I see. They see what is, they see the petals, they see the colors, they see the animals, they see the cat running through, and their attention is taken by this whole world that they're walking through, and we just have a mission to get them to school on time. You see, I think we need to look again and recognize that God is everywhere all the time. I remember in the 1990s having a real God moment in this kind of church service scenario that we were in. And I had my eyes closed and I just got this mental picture of when I was very young. Now, if I were to ask you now, what is your earliest possible memory? Some people could answer like that because you've thought about it, but most people think, oh, let me go back. And you go back to your earliest memory, and then I would ask you to think a little bit earlier. And it's amazing how when you think about it, you kind of put two and two together and where you were and which house you lived in. And I remember something about that, and that must have been earlier. Well, I was in this moment where I felt it was like a God moment. And he reminded me of myself when I must have been 4 or 5 based upon the house that I was in. And I remember this, and as soon as I saw it, I'm thinking, I do remember this. Because when I was 4 or 5, I got told off for being naughty. Now, that wasn't novel. That was kind of usual. But I got sent to bed, sent upstairs, and sat at the top of these stairs in Manchester, England, and sat there angry, frustrated, with my arms crossed, and for some reason saying, I'm going to remember this moment for the rest of my life. Now, I didn't until I did. Until I believe it was God showing me something, because what I felt God say to me in that moment was, Steve, I have known you way beyond even your first memories. I was there. I have always been there. I saw you in the womb. I saw you before the foundation of the earth, because God is omniscient, which means he knows all things and sees all things. It means he was there no matter what you have been through. He's been there on your best days, on your achievements. He's been there on your toughest days, on the worst of days. God is not one that makes sure that humanity avoids bad days and worse days. It's just that he's there with us no matter what day it is. And so he was there for you, and he saw all of those things that other people didn't see. He knows the secrets. He knows the things that only really you know. There may be some things just you and one other may know, but he knows that as well. He knows the things that you have never even whispered or told anyone else. He's God, and here's the amazing thing, that while he sees all of those and knows them, it doesn't matter whether it was good or bad, what you were involved with at that time. He was there. He can bring you through, and he loves you, and he eternally will. He can see all the mistakes we've made, but he can't stop loving us. So can you see God in your day-to-day? It's one of the great lessons of Matthew 25. Secondly, let's see Jesus in the opportunities to help people. Remember, they were talking about, you didn't feed me when you had the chance to feed me because I was hungry. You didn't clothe me when I was naked. You didn't give me shelter when I needed shelter. Opportunities to help people. You know, one good way of looking at the church is not as a church service, but as the hands and feet of Jesus. Maybe his mouthpiece as well. That we're on earth not just to play at church, not just to do church activities and events, but to represent him on earth. You know, your family is all the richer because you're in it. Your neighborhood, your workplace, your school and university, your circle of friends. That if you live right and you live in a way that God endorses and says, good on you, then you are his hands and his feet and his representative. I love this thing in Proverbs 22 verse 9. I've taught on it once and called this the generous eye, that we see generously, or we should do. It says, he who has a generous eye will be blessed, for he gives his bread to the poor. In other words, this person that is being spoken about saw the poor, saw the hungry, but there was generosity in when they saw. They didn't just feel sorry for somebody. It wasn't sympathy. It was generosity with which they saw. And if ever London or wherever you are a resident of needs to see a church in action, it is today. Where instead of the struggles and the challenges and the stuff that is going on across the globe in the church, maybe society doesn't need to know all the things that we're getting wrong alone. Maybe it's time to actually talk about many of the things that we get right. Maybe it's a time to give ourselves and our energies and our talents and our gifts, our time and our resource to the things that make a difference, so that when we stand before our Maker, he says, thank you for feeding me. Thank you for clothing me. Thank you for caring. Thank you for seeing. have a generous eye. The Good Samaritan had a generous eye. A man was beaten, attacked, robbed. A priest walked by. A Levite walked by. But a Good Samaritan stopped because he had generosity in his sight. The majority passed by then, and the majority still pass by today. I could tell you one of many, many stories of people who saw something for the first time and it changed their life. On this very platform, Christine Kane will have spoken a number of times over the years. I've never, ever been able to forget the first time I heard the story when she was in Greece and so devastated at hearing news about how young girls were being trafficked. And with a real kind of pastoral heart and you know, wanting to do something positive, she sat down with this girl who looked in dire straits. And she wanted to reach out to her and show her, hey, I'm a Christian, I love you, I'm interested in you. And she starts off with that perspective. But in talking to the girl, she realized that they were talking two different languages. And I don't mean Greek and English. She said to the girl, this is terrible what you've been through, but I just need you to know that I'm here for you. And the girl said, no, you haven't been here for me. Where were you when I needed you? Where were you when they took my passport? Where were you when they threw me into a little room and hardly came out for many months? Where were you when they took my dignity away? That changed Christine's life, because from that moment she realized it is so easy to say empty words. I'm here for you. I care, but not actually do too much about it. So she started with others A21, which is now one of the most influential organizations globally in dealing with human trafficking around the world. All because she saw and she responded. I don't know if you've been through any airports recently, but I'm going to encourage you to do so. Next time you are in an airport, look for the posters that say, "Can you see me?" There's posters in airports all across the globe that are from A21, who in the very airports are saying to the millions that are coming into nations, the voice of people who can't speak for themselves, saying, "Can you see me? If you see anybody like me in trouble, if you have doubts about somebody being trafficked, whether it be child, whether it be adult, then this is the number to call and do something about it." And I'm grateful for the work of A21. But you see, that girl, to Christine, was Jesus in disguise. She could have listened to that and thought, that's terrible, and then left and gone and preached on a platform. But she did something about it. So when she gets to heaven, God will never say to her, I told you I was in need, but you didn't care. He'll say, thank you for being one of those that did something with your life. See, Jesus lived that way himself, seeing people where they're at and doing the best for them. He saw people others didn't see. He saw Zacchaeus up a tree. Nobody cared. He saw Nathanael under a fig tree. Nobody was around. He saw a woman with the issue of blood that nobody wanted to be near. But he always took the opportunity to making life better for them. Luke records what Jesus was all about when he spent his 33 and a half years on earth. It says in Luke 4, the Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. So does that mean he only preaches? No. To proclaim good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim freedom to the prisoners, recovery of sight to the blind, and set the oppressed free. He spent those last 3.5 years across Galilee, reaching out to the lost and the last and the least of society, and thank God that he did. Those are literal people groups that Luke is talking about, the poor. But the poor is not limited to those who do not just have the resource of finance, but that we can see people who are without. Maybe it's without friendship, maybe it's without love. They're impoverished in life because they have no relationships, they have no security. They are poor in spirit. Maybe there's poverty mentality that we can do something about to help somebody. He reached out to the prisoners, not only those in a jail, but there are far more people not in jail, but locked up on the inside. And if we can see that, then maybe we can do something to bring people out of where they are locked in. He talked about reaching the blind, not only physically, but those who cannot see a way forward, cannot see a way ahead for themselves or family. Miriam was on the platform here before. The very first time I stood on this platform was in September of last year and preached a message. And the illustration I used was about Miriam, because she came to church not knowing whether anybody would care, whether anybody would bother for her son, and so on. And she has an incredible, incredible story of trusting and having faith in God. But the bit of the story that I loved is the way that the church was in action, the way church looked after her and son and so on, and incorporated them into a family. And I think it's one of the most beautiful stories that you could possibly hear. And she's out in the foyer. You can interview and she'll sign autographs later, and it'll fine. But you see, he looked after the oppressed, the troubled, the bullied, the hurt. Let's never be guilty as being those Christians who have got a lot of words but not a lot of actions. So maybe for you and I, it's to see even today, even tomorrow on Monday, even this week through to next weekend, to see the opportunities of showing some kindness somewhere, of saying the words of encouragement to someone, words and actions that bring hope to people, bring joy to people, bring the chance of something changing, because that is exactly what the gospel of Jesus Christ is in essence. Jesus says, by doing so, you do it to me and you do it for me. So come on, London. Words and actions. But the last thing I want to talk to you about is this, that these few verses tell me that we're to see Jesus in experiences that shape us. So it's not only about helping others, but in doing so, we're the ones who are being shaped. There are a few situations in life that I'm so glad I didn't miss out on. I'm so glad that I saw the opportunity. Joyce and I were in Spain for 10 years. We planted churches. Do you have anyone from Spain here or Latin America? ¿Algún latino, hispano, de hablar español aquí en esta mañana? ¿Alguno? We were 10 years in Spain planting churches, and we got involved with people with a substance abuse background, in fact, heroin abuse. And it all happened because of one person. I was preaching one day in our church that we planted, and this guy comes in, grey-faced, teeth rotting away, eyes shut, clearly on heroin. So many around the area where our church were like that. And this guy came in, and our church did the right thing. People brought him in, sat him down, looked after him, and he fell asleep while I was preaching. Not the first time. And I got to the end of the service, and so I want to pray for people who want to get their lives right with Christ. And this guy ran down the front, slid on his knees like a footballer does now in the 21st century. He taught them how to do this. Slid all the way down, got all of my jeans, and said, "Pastor, you've got to save me." Now, you and I know I can't save anybody. But in his mind, he's been shooting death into his veins. And I think in his case was for about 12 years. He couldn't believe he was still alive. He'd nearly died so many times. And as a church, I thought we'd done the right thing. I led him to Christ. I prayed the right prayer. We fed him. We got him coffee. We sat him down. We got his story. We spent time with him. We were still there an hour after the service. And then something happened that changed my life forever. Because this guy, Sebastian, I say to him, "Sebas, I'm just so glad to meet you, and I trust today's been such a life-changing, experience for you. But anyway, I'll see you next Sunday." And as soon as the word Sunday came off my lips, it's like a ton of bricks fell on my head and made me feel about as small as that. I thought, you idiot. A guy's just told you that he's shooting death into his veins every day, and you say, I'll see you next Sunday. You loser. I was harsh on myself. I was disappointed in myself. I'm thinking, what sort of a pastor am I after these years that I send somebody back to the streets from which he came from, and I don't know how to help him? And I couldn't drive home. Joyce drove me home. I phoned up this guy up in the north, 3 hours drive in the Basque Country in the north of Spain, who had had success with helping people get off heroin and give their lives to Christ and get a whole new life. And I thought, I'm going to call this guy. He'd never heard of me. I phoned him and said, this is who I am. This is what's happened. I really don't know how to help this guy, and I need to learn. And can I come and talk to you? And can I come and see? And can I come and learn? When do you want to come? I want to come now. And got in the car that day. And that episode, because somebody's life intersected with mine, not only helped him, but it changed me forever. I went up there and learned so much. Every moment was a learning curve. I'd never seen anything like it. Never seen how to help somebody go through cold turkey and you know, go through the worst of this situation. And it was an amazing experience. And the guy was wise enough to say, Steve, don't go back and do this. They'll pull wool over your eyes. These guys have been living in a life of all sorts, just of survival on the streets. They've had to steal from their own family. You look after the families. You send them to us and we'll look after them because we know how to do this. But you look after them when they go back. You find them the jobs. You find them accommodation. You work out how we can do this. Because I said, I'll see you next Sunday, to one human being who was on drugs at the time, it changed me forever. We went back and we set up a whole ministry. We set up businesses that enable these guys to have the dignity of earning their own money. We set up apartment homes, all with discipleship homes with leaders in them. We ended up 4 or 5 years later with contracts for all sorts of things. You know, we made folders in one place because we had one person in the church who was a book binder, and our first order was for 1 million folders. We could have been successful business people. But every single dollar, every single peseta as it was back then, went into setting up discipleship homes and giving these guys a future. All because on one day, one person, a drug addict, changed my life forever. It helped us change and be involved in the changing of other people's lives across there as well. We have to see the opportunities of learning. We have to see when we intersect with other people's lives that God is giving us an opportunity of experiencing something new. Who's the person that's taught you more than others in life? Who's the person who's close enough to you even now to observe you and that you can learn from? Thank God for them, because God uses people all the time to do the right thing by us. What about when a spouse is Jesus in disguise? My wife is sometimes Jesus in disguise, I've got to tell you. She's the only person, or she's the second person who knows me so well after Jesus. Why? Because she can see my attitudes, actions, reactions. It's so annoying. You can't get away with anything. Why are you getting angry at that driver, Steve? Because he cut me off. He needs to know he's in the wrong. Just lay it down, calm down. I don't enjoy those moments, but the principle is this, that God puts people in your life and my life. They don't have to be a prisoner. They don't have to be someone with an addiction issue. They are the people in your life and my life that we need to start seeing that God in his wisdom has put good people into our world and into our life. The very people at home that you just take as being, well, that's my home life. No, they're people that God has joined you to, your spouse, your children. Have you never learned anything from your kids? Every time we see kids and grandkids, we're the ones who are learning all the time, because God in his kindness looks after us by putting people in our world. I thank God for the one who helped me when I became a Christian and for the next 6 months of my life used to explain stuff to me about the Bible because I didn't know the beginning from the end. I thank people who have pastored. I thank friends who have changed my life. I thank God for a Joe Rowlands who became a man who became a spiritual dad, who picked me up, who believed in me when nobody else did, who told me off when I needed to be told off, who encouraged me and loved me and loved me. And I just trust that in your life, and we're going to pray about it right now, that God puts the right people around you that enables you to not only help other people, but be the one that gets shaped by those. You know, children do that all the time. Children are a gift from the Lord, it says Psalm 127, a reward from him. In fact, in the Message, it says they are the best gift. Learn from your children. Our grandchildren teach us so much. They teach us how to make every day an adventure. Maybe some of us need a bit of a shifting again, a bit of a shake-up to live a life of adventure again because we've settled too early. Life has become too settled, too level playing ground. There is no highs anymore. Look at the child, learn from the child, learn from your children and grandchildren. Every day is a discovery of new things. They teach us to keep life simple because you and I are experts at complicating life. But at 5, you're not too worried about the complications of life. They tell us to enjoy and squeeze everything out of a day when some of us are wasting our days and our months and our times. Maybe the friends at work, maybe the friends in life, maybe work colleagues can be Jesus in disguise to you as well. Joyce had this amazing story when she was living in Zimbabwe of a friend there who was a Christian, and she used to drive Joyce nuts. She's the sort of human being that would drive anybody nuts. But a very sage, wise, older guy said to Joyce, Joyce, if you don't learn the lessons, let's call this lady Josephine for a moment. If you don't learn the lessons of how to handle somebody like Josephine, God is going to give you way more Josephines in your future until you've worked out how to live and work and accept and love that Josephine. And so it is with all of us. Let's learn the lessons so we don't have to keep repeating the same lessons. So God doesn't have to keep putting us in same positions or similar situations because he knows we haven't learned the lessons yet. May God look down on us and think we're seeing what we need to see every day. We're learning about ourselves. We're learning about others. We're giving our lives to helping other people. We're seeing opportunity and making a difference. So let's make sure that you see Jesus in your everyday. Make sure that you see the opportunity today and this week and from this week to do good and to help other people. And let's make sure that you see Jesus, who through people and situations that he puts before you is out to shape you in life, because you and I one day will then stand before him and he'll say, thank you. Thank you for what? Thank you not just for your worship. Thank you not just for your generosity, but thank you for loving me. Thank you for feeding me. Thank you for encouraging me. Thank you for saying kind words. Thank you for showing love when others didn't. Thank you for getting your car out and taking somebody to shop that can't do the shopping on their own. Thank you for the visitations that you did. Thank you for the empathy that you showed. And you might say, well, when did I do all of those things? But if that is the way you've lived your life, happy days in heaven. Because I want to tell you this, eternity is a long time. Jesus, I pray right now for every man, woman, and young person in this Hillsong London auditorium and church service today. Thank you that you've gathered people from even across the nations of the world, and you gathered them to be here on this day, just that they can be touched in their heart and inspired in their spirit to live a life that is worthy of their calling, a calling to be a child of God. I pray, Lord, that you would enable them, Lord, to see you today and tomorrow, see you in all things. May they never come to church and only see songs and buildings and people. May they see you in the center of it all. I pray in their home, I pray they would be grateful for those that you've put them among. I pray that there would be such gratitude for friendships and for people who inspire and help us. And I pray and I prophesy into being, Lord, that you would put the right people among your children, that you would bring guides to them, friendships to them, strength to them, and that they would see it so soon. In Jesus' name I pray. And from this prayer forward, you are my Lord and my Savior, and I am free to live a life that brings honor to your name. Jesus, I love you. Thank you for loving me. Amen.